Hello everybody, I'm Logan Crawford, and this is the award-winning TV talk show right here on Ebru Fresh Outlook. Freedom of the press, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, they are all under attack in Turkey. Journalists, publishers, and editors have been jailed. Take a look at Turkey as it takes aim at its journalists, all in the name, ostensibly, in stopping terror.
In today's developments, the editor-in-chief of Turkey's best-selling daily newspaper, The Zaman, was released from custody pending trial. As part of an intensified government campaign of cracking down on critical and independent media outlets, Zaman's Dumanlı was charged with being a member of a terrorist organization. The charges are based on 2 op-ed pieces and 1 article published in his newspaper 5 years ago. Even so, he said the Zaman Daily will continue to challenge the government's pressure over the media. Also arrested was the general manager of STV on suspicion of heading a terrorist group. The charges are based on a TV series that was broadcast years ago on the television channel. The detention of the STV head was facilitated by a new reasonable suspicion bill, a concept introduced into the country's legislation shortly before the police operation took place. The act, recently signed into law by Erdogan, lowers the threshold of cause or evidence needed to justify searches. Reports indicate the 2 were detained in an inhumane way, denied water, and held for days in a police station. However, outside the courts, thousands gathered during the 5-day detention to show support for the detained journalists, media personnel, and police officers.
Back live here on set at Fresh Outlook, I am joined by the Ebru think tank, Jackie Guzda, media professor at Western Connecticut University. Paul Levinson, a professor of communications and media studies at Fordham University. Dan Friedheim, a former professor and diplomat. And joining us via Skype in Serbia is Danica Radisic, editor for Central and Eastern Europe for Global Voices Online. Also joining us today is Kerim Bolci. He is a columnist for the Daily Zaman, and he's joining us from New York City. Let's go to him right now. Kerim, what is the latest in Turkey as far as you know?
Well, Logan, everybody knows Kerim Bolci is already released, and Hidayet Karaca and 3 police officers, unfortunately, are arrested. But they have the right to continue to go to the courthouse. We will see what will happen in the future. The situation is actually at the level of widespread protest, not only in Turkey but also all over the world. The Turkish communities here in New York, in Texas, in Chicago have shown their solidarity with the Turkish democracy. I think that this is a kind of pain for laboring and mature democracy in Turkey.
Kerim, how would you respond to the question from the Erdogan administration that the journalists have been jailed because they've been involved in trying to usurp the power of the government and involved in some type of terror activity?
Well, the point is, everybody knows that, first of all, what has been done in Turkey is actually a revenge operation of last year. The timing is meaningful in that sense. Last year's craft operations of 17th of December and 25th of December, we are observing the anniversary of those operations, and it seems that the Erdogan regime does not want to hear any kind of opposition voice in the country, and this was a kind of punishment strategy for him. But the prosecutor had to make up a pretext for the detainments and the arrests following, and he could find only one issue, and unfortunately I will use the term a stupid pretext. The fact that my newspaper and Samanyolu Media Group had used the information provided by the police forces about an Al-Qaeda proxy in Turkey, and Samanyolu TV made this issue a part of its series, a soap opera series. In one of the episodes was used as the pretext of detainment and arrest. this puts actually the Turkish government, unfortunately, in the same boat with Al-Qaeda and my newspaper group and Samanyolu Broadcasting Group in the boat of the people of peace lovers and people who are protesting against terrorism. So in that sense, the people who are protesting against the detainments are also protesting against Al-Qaeda terrorism and their proxies in Turkey. Unfortunately, the Turkish media is under 60% full and direct control of the President of Turkey, so we don't see in those media organs any kind of criticism towards the detainments. And in fact, when they are broadcasting from the protests all over the world and within Turkey, they are usually trying to belittle the response from the streets. I can say that the Zaman Media Group is not influenced at all, but the neutral media group is quite scared from the president, and that is one of the reasons why media response is not powerful enough.
All right, Kerim, joining us live from a protest in New York City. We'll joining you back again in just a few moments. Let's turn to Paul Levinson from Fordham University. First off, what's your take on what's happening in Turkey?
I think it's very serious. Journalists are the lifeblood of any democracy, because how can people vote in a meaningful way if they don't have information about what's going on? But unfortunately, it's always one of the prime temptations, even in democratic societies, to crack down on journalists if the people in power feel that journalists are being too critical of them. And so, unfortunately, what we're seeing in Turkey is an all too common situation. We've occasionally had it here in the United States.
James Rosen from Fox News Channel being investigated by the Justice Department is an example of that, right?
Exactly. Or what was going on during Occupy Wall Street, where journalists were covering the stories and they were arrested. New York City just settled a multi-million-dollar suit brought by people who were reporting on Occupy Wall Street, right. And it was a civil case. So this is an all too common but very serious
Absolutely.
situation.
As a reporter in a very corrupt city, Providence, Rhode Island, I was strong-armed by the mayor there, Buddy Cianci, so I know what that's all about. He basically said, I'm going to get you, Logan. Fortunately, he did not. Patrick Kennedy said the same thing to me, I'm going to get you, Logan. But anyway, Jackie, what is your take on Turkey?
It's breaking my heart. I was in Turkey about 4 years ago, and I loved it. It's a wonderful country. But you can see in these last 4 years, you can see the democracy being chipped away little by Erdogan. I mean, when I was driving in here, I had heard that he had put out an arrest warrant for Gulen, who is here in the United States. And I think that is the crux of this fight here. You've got Erdogan versus Gulen, the different philosophies.
And for our viewers, to catch you up on who Gulen is, it's Fethullah Gulen, who is the head of the Hizmet movement, which is basically a group that seeks interfaith and intercultural dialogue. Dan Friedheim, what's your take on the situation in Turkey?
Well, stepping back a little bit to put it in a broader perspective, I'd say that this kind of behavior, rounding up in a veritable dragnet a bunch of journalists just because they say someone you know or you yourself might be corrupt, that puts Turkey in the category of countries like Russia and Venezuela. And this dubious distinction, this dubious standard of a reasonable suspicion, which is obviously being used unreasonably at this moment, that's a lot like what Hugo Chavez in Venezuela did, passing an information law. It sounds good, it says only true information is free.
Exactly.
But he got to decide what was true.
Some of the worst things in the world are done in the name of combating terror. We're finding that out more and more every day. In fact, in the name of protecting children as well. Let's turn now to Danica Radisic joining us via Skype. Danica, what's your take on this, by the way, in the situation in Turkey?
Well, first of all, I'd have to agree with what everyone in the panel has said thus far. And I'd like to take yet another step back and kind of tie into what everybody has said. What's happening in Turkey right now didn't happen overnight. It's not just a current situation. This took years, if not a couple of decades, to come to this. And Jackie just said that, daily you see this wearing away at the media landscape, and a free press is essential to building and maintaining any democracy. As Professor Levinson just pointed out, people need to be informed in order to come to sane and decisions of any sort. So to tie into that, this has been going on for years, and we can actually see this also happening in other countries in the region. I'm in Serbia right now. I work mostly out of Serbia, and I work in the entire region. And it's happening in almost every country in the Balkans. And I think that they're taking a few pointers from the current Turkish regime daily. Basically, when you have, let's say, a fake sort of power, in the sense where you're in power, but you kind of built this halfway fictional and corrupt world around yourself. As a leader of that type, to maintain that, you need to crack down on free press, on getting relevant and valid information that you have no solutions to, on getting information about problems that you have no solutions to. It's kind of like building a power bubble, and bubbles are, of course, very sensitive. So they have to keep everything away that might potentially burst that bubble. And that's what we're seeing happening gradually and daily in all of these countries. And it's just gone very far in Turkey.
And as it is often says, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And that might be what we're seeing here with the Erdogan regime in Turkey. He has consolidated power. He has gone from prime minister to the president of Turkey, and he won in a landslide just recently, as a matter of fact. Let's go back to New York City and join Kerim Bolci, who is live in the heart of a protest that is taking place in the name of freedom of expression and freedom of speech. Kerim, how do you see this getting resolved? Is there any way to strike an accord with the Erdogan administration?
Well, first of all, I have to respond to Jackie. Turkey is still a beautiful country. Erdogan is a headache, but the body is safe and sound. We will get rid of this headache soon, I hope. The point is, a majority of the public is being informed by the media that is controlled by Erdogan regime. A survey made soon after March 13 local elections showed that 62% of Turkish people was not aware of the legally wiretap speech between the prime minister and his son about money laundering and so on. This suggests that it will take some time to convince the people that the direction Turkey is going towards is wrong, and the whole society has to say something about this. We are going to have an election in June 15, and I am quite optimistic about the response of the general public then, because this is no longer a national issue, it is an international issue. This is not about only democracy of Turkey, this is about Turkish cooperation with the modern Western countries vis-a-vis the ISIS in Syria, because it seems that the government is unfortunately standing with an Al-Qaeda proxy, and this overlaps with the fact that Turkish government has been hesitating about cooperating with the Western powers on how to and when to fight with ISIS. It seems that the pressure that is going to come from European Union and United States and international bodies will give some result, if not on Erdogan regime on itself, but on the decisions of the public, hopefully.
All right, Kerim Bolci, thank you for joining us today via live view from the heart of a protest in New York City. Jackie, we're going to have our last words and last comments from the panel right now, but let's start with you, because I want you to clarify your remarks about Turkey. I know you weren't denouncing the country, you're denouncing what's happening there.
No, not at all. I love Turkey.
Right.
But what we've got to do is support social media. If they're going to crack down on the general media, the people of Turkey need to get the real information.
And that's one thing that Erdogan tried to do last summer, was actually turn off Twitter.
Exactly.
Because that's the fourth component now of the free press, is that the people are now citizen journalists.
Right, so if we can keep Twitter, Facebook, all kinds of social media open to the citizens of Turkey, then they can get the real information.
And we'll see if that happens. Dan Friedheim, your final thought?
Oh, I had noticed the Committee to Protect Journalists had mentioned Turkey had been the worst country in the world for jailing journalists. This year, China only passed it because it jailed a few ethnic minority journalists in Xinjiang, a region uprising. And Turkey has a region like that too, with ethnic Kurds. But these are not arrests of ethnic rebellious populations.
These are mainstream journalists. Exactly.
Right? And per capita, since Turkey's obviously not as huge as China, really, Turkey's become once again the worst jailer of journalists.
Paul, what are your final thoughts? I noticed you were nodding a lot when we talked about citizens journalists being a component of this.
Yes, because one good aspect of our world today is that it's much more difficult to crack down on citizen journalists than it is traditional media. Because if somebody wants to crack down, say, on a television station like this one, you just bring a few police here and that's it. But how are you going to crack down on millions of people with cell phones, putting up videos on YouTube, tweeting about it? And Erdogan's attempt to shut out Twitter failed. And these attempts always fail. So that's the good news about this. And I think the best thing Erdogan could do is learn a little bit more from history and back off.
Absolutely. Let's turn to our Skype guest, Danica Radisic. What is your final thought on this, Danica?
I would love to be able to be as optimistic as everyone else, but as someone who lives and works here as a citizen journalist and an editor, there are other methods being used to scare people away. For instance, and these sorts of things have also happened in Turkey and other countries, but for instance, this summer during the massive floods in Serbia and Bosnia, the authorities here in Serbia began detaining and calling in for police questioning just common citizens who tweeted negatively about government efforts to aid after the floods. So common citizens have also been detained. Yes, these are scare tactics. These people will not be actually going to jail, although some of them did spend some time in detainment. But these are scare tactics that actually work. They work for a while, but then you use them again and they go on working. I do believe that the internet and not just social media do need to be supported as a tool, that just in general, people here, citizens, need to be taught to use these alternative tools that are basically mainstream here as well now, that they need to be taught to use them not only to get information, but also to speak out as a collective and to show that they are stronger and more massive than the people trying to use these scare tactics.
All right, Danica, thank you so much for joining us today. When we return, the conversation continues. Muslim journalists, it's happening in Turkey. It's even happening right here in the United States. More on that after this.